So, hi guys. Thank you guys for joining. Marjan is going to be speaking through my Clubhouse account because she's an Android. So, I'm super excited to have Marjan here with us today. We first got to know each other, I guess it's been 2 years ago now, that we met at a panel that we were on together. And then we just ended up hanging out afterwards, and I've been pretty obsessed with her work ever since. I have a link to, I've retweeted her on my Twitter, so if you guys want to check out her work, you can go to the link in my bio for Twitter and then check out her work there. So I want to start out with asking Marjan, when did you first get super interested in digital, and what was that process like? Like, what tools were you using?
Well, it was actually a very long time ago, and I'm originally from Iran, and I grew up there before the Islamic Revolution, during the Shah's regime. And so I was basically around 17 years old, and when the revolution happened, and I managed to escape, or my family got me out before I could get, hurt. And I arrived in New York, and I was at New York Tech around the time when one of the faculty members there had created the world's first paint program. And so I was very much introduced almost immediately to the new technology. And for me, it was like instant love. And there were really two reasons. Back then, keep in mind that the computers that ran that software were called, VAX supercomputers. And they were like, you weren't allowed to take the cover off them because they were also used for missile guidance control systems. And they were not exactly easy to use. And the thing that I almost immediately noticed was that I was very good with the technology. And the second thing was that I think that because of the Islamic Revolution in my country of origin and the catastrophic cost of that for me, I was, really looking to futurism and technology as a way of coping, I think, with what had happened to me. So I think to some extent, trauma was at work behind the way I embraced the technology and threw myself into it. And so, I think when the Commodore 64 first came out, I could actually deal with a personal computer as opposed to something that was the size of a refrigerator at a university. And, I did my first, computer animation on a Commodore 64. I was the official video artist at the legendary Pyramid Club from 1984 and 1988. And where I shot, where I shot a lot of the performance art, bands, etc. But I also created content for, for showing at the club back then. And so a lot of my early art was that. And I was also showing a lot of that work at, in the East Village Gallery. So my joke is I did an unofficial MFA in the East Village in the 1980s. With pretty much everyone, and actually I have the video on YouTube. It's called Drag Queen Skinheads, Artists and Some Girls, which and that a lot of people refer to in terms of the golden era of the pyramid back then, including Tim Lawrence, author of the Death on the New York Dance Floor, which inspired the MoMA Club 57 exhibition. So I worked with pretty much all the famous artists back then. And so it was a great thing for me. Yep, go on, sorry.
Oh, no. I was just, for the people that are joining, Marjan isn't on Clubhouse, so you can check out her work by, if you scroll to my Twitter, you can see I just retweeted something that she did. Or you can also Google her. She's on Instagram and Twitter as well. So just wanted to let those people know. So sorry, go ahead, continue.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating.
Yeah, but I was also the typical sort of starving artist in New York City. I mean, I did not necessarily come from a wealthy family. We were middle class, and like I think most middle class Iranians under the Shah, the revolution sort of wiped out my family. So I was kind of living in a squat without heat, which was a very East Village thing in the 1980s. And I was doing, basically I was, for a living, what I was doing is I was doing early video production work, and I was shooting bands. And that's why I have such a large collection of videos from that back then, because that's how I made my living. And I was, I think by the around 1986, the Amiga computer came out, and that was so much more powerful than the Commodore 64. And I got my first Amiga in 1987 and started to actually really do a lot more animation. I'd been trained in animation in college, including traditional cell animation. So, I wasn't approaching sort of computer animation from a background of no animation. And I had very strong ideas about exhibiting computer art then, but most people really weren't dealing with computer art. And like I remember in the 1980s, I did PMS, which was an animation I exhibited in many galleries in the East Village at that time. And if it wasn't for the East Village galleries, I wouldn't be able to show that anywhere, because people weren't dealing with feminist computer animation with vaginas opening inside of a head back then. Back then, computer art was male artists doing color cycled polygons, and which were minimalist and conceptual. So the sort of expressionistic computer animation I was doing was very much rooted in the neo-expressionism, as it was called, art of the East Village in the 1980s, which did include, Keith Haring, Kenny Scharf, David Wojnarowicz, and all those artists. I actually did a music video, kind of like art music video with Three Teens Kill Four, which was David's no wave band back then also. So from the beginning, it was a battle, because computer art was not really accepted. I mean, video art was. I remember like literally showing it on video, and it was like computer animation, but they would call it video art because it was on video. Mm-hmm. And also because they didn't want to show something called computer anything. So it was like a real battle. And sometime around the late 1980s, I started to work at, in addition to doing, my fine arts work, I got into working in production studios and went to work at All Pro Studios at Lincoln Center. And I think that was like around the time when suddenly I felt like, wow, I mean, I can actually move up a little bit in terms of my pay. So, I just remember that as being a really golden era in my life, because suddenly it felt like, wow, I can actually make more than, less than minimum wage shooting bands at clubs in the East Village. So it really felt like I was moving up in the world, even though I was, grossly underpaid even by the standards back then. Women in those studios back then were like, you were paid less than the secretary, even though you were doing the same work as all the other guys, And but for me, that was like a major upgrade. I remember thinking that, and it was a golden period. And after that, I just sort of continued to do my fine arts work and exhibit it as best as I could while working in different production studios. And I sort of worked my way up by around 93, 94, I had my own studio with two partners. I sort of worked my way up to that. Digital Media Arts Inc. It was at 150 Fifth Avenue and 18th Street. And, we worked on some of the top early computer animation accounts back then. I did animation projects for NBC Primetime, multimedia presentations for Ernst & Young, and lots of subcontract work for CTW, Children's Television Workshop, and other companies like that. And the reason that I had to become a partner in a studio is because it was the only way I could get any respect. I mean, I had to work really hard to sort of get to that. And so it's like a kind of like a testament to how difficult it was for women in that era. And then I got into the early internet. I sort of registered my Marjan.com domain in 1995. And back then I remember all the production studio animators that I knew were like, they just thought the internet was a waste of time because, you know, the early internet was very different. And I thought it was the ultimate, you know, and I was very excited about showing my art there because it felt that, you know, I can actually exhibit my own work and not have to battle to get shows. So I was like, I fell in love with the early internet specifically because of my fine arts work. And I remember all my production friends thought I was like wasting my time on the early internet. And so I became one of the first 100 artists to do GIF animation on the internet, and was listed in
That's so
various
cool.
internet kind of things back then. Around that time, I was also exhibiting at a Soho gallery. I was exhibiting like head immersive, early kind of virtual reality installation art with my computer generated fractal art. And I was also doing performance pieces with it. I was doing prints from it. So I was trying to materialize and fabricate the digital sellable objects every which way there was. And I was showing those in the gallery district in New York City back then was in Soho. And actually the gallery that I was exhibiting it on was like Broadway and Prince Street. It was across the street, like the other side of Broadway was all the early Silicon Alley companies. And so my joke is I was kind of like working with some of these companies during the day, and at 6 p.m., you know, there'd be like an opening of my work across the street at the gallery. So, and I think that synergy between the gallery district in New York and early Silicon Alley, which sort of defined the internet as we know it, was very big part of the internet 1.0 era. And actually my box installation literally went straight from the gallery that it was in across the street to internet pioneer Josh Harris's CEO office at Jupiter Communications back in 1996. Around that time, I also became the featured artist for the launch of .com Gallery, an international forum for the digital arts, which was the first commercial gallery on the internet, and sponsored by Prodigy Inc., which was the #2 internet company then. And so I worked on a lot of those sort of early internet art exhibition and art for the internet with my 3D CG avatar, which I had to model myself. There weren't a lot of human generators back then. So I did a lot of those pieces, which were like 3D CG for print and also internet, and also as animation in the 90s. And sometime around then, under the advice of collector Bodie, who was a very famous East Village collector of East Village art from the 1980s. And he was actually visiting New York, and he visited me, and he's the one who sort of convinced me to accept a faculty position that had been offered to me. And I didn't want it at that time, but Bodhi sort of convinced me, because Bodhi's argument was it's going to be the best thing for your art. And so I listened to him, and I went into academia, and I'm still in academia. I'm a tenured full professor. But, you know, over the course of the years, I've continued to sort of create different bodies of 3D CG digital art and exhibit it, you know, in galleries and also a lot of festivals. I've been in SIGGRAPH a total of 4 times. I was also in SIGGRAPH's 30 Years of Computer Art International Traveling Exhibition, which toured galleries and museums around the world with 30 years of computer art from the SIGGRAPH archives back in 2003. I've received lots of grants for kind of like, you know, experimental computer art. I was a featured artist for the Visual Music Marathon from Northeastern at New York's Digital Salon, and that was funded by the Rockefeller Fund. I've done other experimental, you know, digital art projects that were funded by Brooklyn Arts Council and New York Department of Cultural Affairs, experimental TV, and a bunch of other granting agencies. And I've won numerous awards for computer art, animation, new media, etc. And and I sort of continued doing creating different bodies of work since. I guess we can talk about some of those, but I'm going to stop and let you ask a question.
Oh yeah. No, oh my gosh, like
I know I just kind of like went like down the
oh
list.
no, I'm enjoying like every minute of it. It's no, this is fascinating. The one, so I want to ask also, and thank you so much for sharing all this. I think so I know you can't see since you're not on Clubhouse, but people are clapping with their microphones to what you're saying. So everybody's really
Oh, that's
enjoying
awesome.
hearing. Yeah, everybody's really enjoying hearing your story. I'd love to hear, because I know you've been focused the last couple of years on this series, the glitch goddesses, which is just I love so much. I wonder if you could kind of give us you know, different bodies of work that you've, like how you got to the glitch goddesses, and maybe, you know, maybe some works that led up to that, or how you got to be to focusing on that body of work.
Yeah, well, actually, before we get to the glitch goddesses, like just to explain where they came from, the whole pipeline.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course.
Around 2008, I started working with motion capture using a Vicom studio. And so in 2009, I did Scab, which was Instagraph 2009 and Best of that year. Scab was based on post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, and it was mostly my own PTSD, really. So it really came from a personal place. And with Scab, what I did is I sort of came up with this whole pipeline that I've been mostly using since. So that's kind of why I wanted to go to Scab, which was to use motion capture of improvised performance. And then I modeled these characters in all sorts of abstract styles to be driven by the mocap. And then I combined that animation channel with dynamics and simulations. And of course, you know, post to pose hand keyframing, which I was, you know, very trained in, because I did a lot of character work in the 1990s and also to some extent in the 2000s. So I had a background in doing post-to-post character animation in 3D CG, but my interest wasn't to do like cartooning or things of that kind, although I had been trained in it and had worked on those projects in the studios. But my interest was really to find some kind of a fine arts way of expanding that particular dialogue of character animation and figurative animation in terms of the post-digital. And so Scab was really the beginning of that whole pipeline, which I've since been using and of course substantially expanded. And right after Scab, I did my Of Revolutions collection, which I did from 2010 to about 2016. And those were all pretty much the same styles of figures. And that entire collection I exhibited as large format prints, sculpture, avatiered painting in which the audience drives my figures with gestural control of explosions, tons of fun. And I also did it as animated paintings. And that collection was exploring two things, a lot of the crises of our time and late stage capitalism and feminist ideas, and also my own kind of personal life history. It was kind of like the mashup of the global crisis and also my own personal journey within that. And so I finished that collection around 2016, but by then I had really developed this sort of pipeline of animating 3D CG figures in this sort of artistic style that I'd come up with using a combination of mocap, post-to-pose animation techniques, dynamic simulations, etc. And I should also add at this point that, you know, at this point I was kind of like in my mid 50s, and while I had always struggled to get gallery exhibitions because of the medium I worked with, and also, you know, being a woman doing bleeding edge art has always been a battle, because you know, a lot of people I think acknowledge that the work is really something, but because of my gender, there's always this hesitation if we don't know if it has a value. Because I think when a man does these things, there's always this sort of automatic assumption of intellectual worth and merit. But when a woman does it, there's always this suspicion of intellectual worth and merit. And so it was always like a hard sell. But, you know, at this point, like around 2016, I had literally reached a point where I realized, you know, as an older woman doing bleeding edge technology art, I'm like the worst the worst identity thing, you could possibly be as far as the galleries were concerned. And that's when I sort of had this idea, why don't I just hack my art into found and shot exhibition footage on the internet? Like, I don't need anybody to show me. And so at first, the art hacks, which I started in 2016 on Instagram, was really like for me, it was like a little bit of a personal joke. Frieze New York was happening, and everybody kept saying, "Are you in Frieze this year?" And I was like, because I had been in several art fairs, and so people were like, "Are you in Frieze this year?" And I was like, "No, I couldn't get in. Nobody wanted to show my work." And then I had this idea, well, why don't I just hack my art into Frieze? I mean, most of the art that we look at is already on Instagram and Facebook. So why bother actually doing a physical exhibition in order to put that footage online on social media? Why not just do it? So it started as a joke, but then I kept doing it because I really saw an interesting potential for redefining form for digital art. Like, what is the inherent form for digital art? And increasingly, it's net art, period. So there was that idea. And then there was this idea that I loved of radicalizing curation and democratizing the exhibition space, which to me really felt like that the utopian ideals of the internet 1.0 era. Like, what is the internet for if not this, to disrupt these exhibitions, to intervene in these exhibitions, and to share it with people all over the world? I mean, to me, that as a member of the internet 1.0 generation, I mean, that was automatic.
Well,
So,
and you probably, I think you brought more attention to the spaces that you hacked as well, because there's people that are, your audience of people is going to be more interested into what spaces you chose to hack that maybe they weren't even familiar with before that.
That's actually true. Like literally within the first year of doing the hacks, a gallery in Chelsea contacted me, and they had like some, I don't know, third or fourth rate Damien Hirst thing in their gallery. And it wasn't really good work. And I'm not a fan of Damien Hirst. And so they contacted me on Instagram and they said, well, why don't you come and, hack this Damien Hirst piece? Because I could see that they were trying to get some attention for it so they could sell the work. And so I DM'd them back and I said, this work doesn't really engage me. It doesn't, I don't connect with, I don't even know what I would do with it. I mean, for me, this work has to be inspired. It's not like, and they even offered, oh, we can work something out with you and maybe give you a show or whatever. And I was just like, no, I didn't do it. And I remember a friend of mine said, no, you should charge and do this. And I said to my friend, I said, I can safely say that I don't want to do that. Like, I'm willing to do branded projects. So it's not a question of that, but I'm not willing to turn this body of work into branded projects. Like, to me, there's a difference.
Right.
And yeah, go on.
Oh no, I was going to say, because you started it, this particular project, you started as sort of this like outsider renegade project, so you want to keep this particular project
exactly.
with
and also because I love doing it. And like literally from the second hack I did was Art Basel, Switzerland in 2016, and I brought my sort of late stage capitalist critique dialogue of David and Goliath from my earlier work straight into that, and I just love that. And then that fall something really interesting happened with the hack. This was fall of 2016. It was like October 2016. And Gagosian on Madison Avenue, which is, one of the biggest blue chip galleries in New York City, was having this survey of 100 years of the nude in art. And, they had everyone from Picasso and Modigliani to Jean-Michel Basquiat, Francis Bacon. I mean, it was like the 100 years of the rock stars of art. And so I went to the show, and it was like there was no digital nude, and it's like the 21st century, and no non-binary nude. And that's when I had this idea to do my non-binary nude glitch in my style of chronometric sculpture as an intervention in that show. And I remember literally when I finished that piece, it's like I literally remember posting it to Instagram and thinking, there's something about this hack and the way all of these ideas have come together that really, for me, felt like it had totally click. Like suddenly my whole art practice made perfect sense, if to nobody
Mhm.
else, to me, you know. But it just like, it was a moment of wholeness in everything I do, and my entire journey. Like everything clicked, and all the puzzle pieces just kind of went click and went right into their places. And that's when I understood the power for intervention with a critical discourse in these exhibition spaces, which for me were increasingly not only out of touch with the digital revolution of our world, as they had been for 4 decades, in my opinion, but they were also out of touch with the important conversations of our world. So it just like, to me, everything clicked, from the aesthetic technique that I had in this artistic way of animating these figures, to the interventionist dialogue, and to doing it all within this sort of virtual mixed reality version of exhibition spaces.
What's been for you, what do you think has been the biggest change that's happened, let's say like in the last 5 or 10 years, that you feel like is going to be a benefit for us as as digital artists?
I think the biggest thing that has happened is definitely, unquestionably, and undoubtedly NFTs and crypto art. And which is relatively recent phenomenon. We're really talking about the last 3 years primarily. And there's been an incredible acceleration that has been partially fed by the pandemic and the shutting down of physical spaces, physical exhibition spaces, physical places of business, physical places of entertainment. And this has sort of accelerated a reliance on the net and the digital. And you look at the explosion of VR social worlds and various metaverses. There really has been a sudden explosion since March 2020. And so you sort of, you look back at the dollars for the crypto art space and NFTs in March 2020, or even look at Bitcoin, which was like, what was it, like $4,000 that last March. And then if you just look at the graph of the explosion, in my opinion, there's no way you can deny the significance of the pandemic in suddenly creating a need for the virtual, and then a way of monetizing it. And in my opinion, this is to a large extent something that has been missing from digital art and the selling of digital art. I always say, for the last 4 decades, I've watched digital art not receive the respect of even video art or performance art. I mean, you see artists doing performance art selling photographic prints for, prices that rival top fine arts photography. But you don't see that happening with the digital. Digital has sort of been the bastard child of contemporary art for 4 decades. And so materializing the digital, or as either print or 3D print sculpture or installation, or in my case, the video art object. I've kind of done all of these things, but I always feel like none of these things have really performed that well. And over the years, people say, well, how do I collect this digitally? And, at one point, I remember years ago, I looked into encryption and cloud hosting for the encryption, and the issue was always the costs. And then, how do you keep this going in perpetuity, So I've tried to figure out ways of selling digital for years now, because it always comes up and people inquire about it, and I do the research, and it's been a battle. And I have to say, the beauty of the blockchain, the beauty of NFTs is suddenly it feels like every problem I tried to solve for so many years in terms of the technology, and also issues of longevity and the provenance, all of these were like instantly solved by both NFTs and crypto art. So unquestionably and undoubtedly, the best thing that is happening for digital art, on the one hand, is the infrastructure of the blockchain, NFTs and crypto art. And secondly, I think some aspect of the pandemic and the way it's forced everybody to make greater use of the digital and the net, and to some extent even social VR for the people who are participating in social VR worlds. Something about that has allowed for the virtual to become equal to the physical for the first time. I think
I totally agree.
there is some kind of a cultural shift where suddenly, if you can work virtually, virtual work can potentially have the same value as physical work. So I think there's a real philosophical shift that's happened as a result of the pandemic that is supporting the migration to the digital. And, when you sort of look at the sudden explosion of the finances of digital art and the crypto and NFT space, I mean, yes, a lot of that is coming as a result of the investment that's pouring into it. So, there's an aspect of spam, if you may, to put things in net terms, but there's also an organic aspect. And that organic aspect, in my opinion, is because of the fundamental philosophical shift that has happened as a result of the pandemic.
Do you feel that, because I know you'd mentioned that you felt like it was very much in, I think you said in the 90s that the type of work that you were doing, it created a lot of complications being a woman doing cutting edge work. Do you feel like that there is more of an even playing field for genders with our current situation, or do you still feel like that is a struggle?
No, there definitely is. I mean, things have really improved. I mean, it's kind of sad that despite the fact that they've improved so much, I'm aware that it's still an issue, but definitely compared to the 90s, huge improvement. I mean, I now work with so many different XR companies where everyone from the owners, the CEOs, to the founders of the companies, down to some of the teams even, are all women. I mean, I'm working right now on a very, very ambitious AR experience, which is kind of like the story of my trauma, if you may, in AR, for the Helium app and Story Us. And this is a company that's owned by a woman. The Unity team I'm working with, the programmers are Unity. The Unity team is a woman, basically. I'm doing all the digital assets, and I'm a woman. And it's almost like, you would never have this in the 90s. I don't remember walking into any tech company that was owned by a woman and where the tech team the entire development team was female. I just don't, that never happened in the 90s, but that is happening today. So I think that's a testament to how much things have changed.
I think it's, in part due to, people like yourself that were out there, creating and being, visibly, out there, and female, like, gives, other creatives, someone to look up to and to say like, well, she kind of looks like me and I could do that too, so like it's, definitely a testament to leaders like you that have really been doing the hard work so that everyone can feel welcome in this space.
Oh, thank you. But you bring up a really good point, and there's a story I want to share about the power of exactly what you said. I taught 3D for many, many years, by the way, undergrad and grad. And I remember in the late 90s, I would get these like 3D animation classes that were like, 12 guys and 2 girls. So it'd be like 14 students. And I remember in the late 90s, I had this class, and the 2 girls in that class were really good artists. I really liked them. And by week 4, it was like every week when the assignments were due, the guys would like kind of get into this like show off thing, and the girls had nothing to show. Like I could see I was losing them, that they just weren't connecting. They I don't know, for all sorts of reasons. And I remember around that time, the movie Mask had come out with Jim Carrey, and it was the first time they were using 3D CG for the animated cartoon characters in a feature film. So it was quite a big deal. But the lead animator was Eileen Poon. So I remember I just literally came into class, and it was really my way of trying to figure out a way to rescue those 2 girls and make sure they don't just, blow off the rest of the semester. And so I did a whole 15-minute presentation on Eileen Poon. And it was like the girls' jaws had dropped. Like here was the most impressive deployment of 3D CG animation in Hollywood feature films at that time. And the lead animator was a woman. I'm telling you, within 2 weeks, I saw the turnaround in those two girls. And by the end of the semester, they had the best final projects in class. So what you're talking about is really important. Like if you show other women, skillful work by other women, it has such a tremendous amount of power. And I went through this same exact thing in the 2000s. Every time I had a class full of girls who were like kind of like disconnecting because the guys were doing whatever it is the guys do, I would show them my good friend, Pat Hanaway. Pat was the principal animator, that means lead animator, for Gollum in Lord of the Rings 1, 2, and 3. How many people know that the first major realistic full CG actor in a major blockbuster franchise was done by a woman?
Right. Yeah.
How many people know that? So there have been women like that all along. It's just that they don't get the attention.
That's great. I think Wade has a question. So we'll open up. We've got about 25 or 23 minutes left. So I want to open up to Regina and Wade. They're super talented curators in the new media space. So I know Wade has shared, he's a big fan of your work. So
Thank you.
Wade, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to, I wanted to say, I actually did know that, but that's only because I'm a super Lord of the Rings nerd, and I think I've watched like all of the directors cut like
That's good.
But this is less of a question than a comment, and this is just speaking to your point about visibility. Something that always helps me to ground these conversations is I come from like a gaming background. I'm a huge gamer. I have been since I was a little kid, and if you look at the statistics in the United States, I think it's something like 60 or 70% of all adults in the United States play video games. And of that, percentage, it's about 50-50 male to female. So this entire industry that is so like hyper masculine, that is so like known to be this like ultra macho like boys arena, is very 50-50. It's also totally split along racial lines too. The gaming world is for everyone. There are just as many women as there are men there, but people don't think about it or realize that because the way that I think that men make themselves visible in those game spaces is very different than the way women do. But I think that like upon thinking about that a little bit more, we realize that how important the role of women is in these spaces. And so I always try to remember that and remind people of that, because this isn't just like, a boys' game. This is something that's for everyone.
No, I totally agree. I think visibility is very, very important. And that's why I sort of shared both of those stories about Eileen Poon and Pat Hanaway. And Pat and I are good friends. We chat on Facebook, frequently. She's now full-time faculty at Dartmouth. But and Pat and I, by the way, hang out upstate. We sort of meet midway between Vermont and the Adirondacks and hang out. So we continue to have our own sort of ongoing dialogue as friends and 3D CG artists. But Wade is absolutely right. It's like that when you sort of look at these statistics, they matter. I was recently interviewed for the BBC documentary Art Goes Digital, and my joke is I'm the woman between Beeple and X-Copy in that documentary. And it's like weird because they're the only woman in there, and it's like I'm somewhere between Beeple and X-Copy is my clip. But they actually used a lot of clips of my work in that documentary. And I'm happy that one of the clips I actually put my name on it, so you can tell it's mine. But the thing about when they were interviewing me for that, the BBC interviewer, I actually did a lot on underrepresentation of women and people of color and all of that, but I guess they didn't use that. But probably due to time constraints. But but the interviewer told me that, you know, the art world statistics are 99% of the work that is sold is by white males. And I was trying to point out that actually, in my observation, crypto art has created a lot of opportunity for not just women, but also trans artists. I mean, Sam is a good example. Also, for people of color. I mean, there are a lot of artists I meet who are people of color, who are international, who are from Singapore, who are from India, you know, who are from the Middle East. I mean, there are crypto artists from inside of Iran that are selling their art. I mean, to me, this is astonishing. I mean, what's the likelihood of any of us witnessing this in the New York art world? You know, take a moment to consider that. So visibility is very important. And sometimes I think each time one of these artists sells a piece and, you know, the news travels through Twitter or, you know, Discord or wherever. I mean, mostly Twitter and Discord and Instagram, really, for crypto. What happens is it has such a power for all the other artists who don't see anyone like them in artistic spaces. So here I think crypto is actually making a difference. And I just wanted to kind of make a quick distinction that, you know, NFTs to me are the technology, you know, of selling digital assets as collectibles. And, you know, my joke is I have texture packs from Beeple from years ago, but their value has not increased because they were never designed as a digital asset. They were never designed as a collectible. So here there has to be a distinction between digital assets as assets versus digital assets as collectibles. And NFTs to a large extent are about collectibles that are similar to, you know, stamps and coins and celebrity and pop culture collectibles and memorabilia. So it's very important to understand non-fungible tokens are the technology. They're not necessarily art per se. But Matt Kane, the artist, has made the distinction, and I always quote and cite him, that there's NFTs, the technology, and then there's crypto art, the art movement. And I completely agree with that distinction, that there is a very real art movement in terms of crypto art happening simultaneously as the sort of, you know, NFT world of collectibles and ephemera. And the crypto art movement is very legitimate, and it is allowing for women, people of color, and other marginalized and under-recognized groups to have greater participation in ways that were not happening in the physical, you know, contemporary art exhibition ecosystem.
Marjan, I have a question.
This is Regina.
I wanted to ask Hi. Two questions actually. And first of all, thank you so much for everything you've said, the history of your work. It's really been a pleasure for me and the audience, I'm sure, as well. But I wanted to bring us back a little bit to the 90s again. And I thought one of the most important points you brought up was that there were gallerists in New York City that were giving digital artists a chance to show work. And it's just not talked about enough, I think. I recently saw the documentary, We Live in Public, about Josh Harris, and it's such an important documentary to give the insight into that period, but it also says so little compared to everything you began to color in this conversation. So one of my questions is, who are the names of some of these gallerists, if you can remember, and the names of these galleries, Beyond.com gallery, that were pioneering this work, because their voices definitely aren't heard in the canon.
I'm so happy you brought this up, because I have a solo show coming up at Moghaddam Museum of Contemporary Digital Art in Decentraland this May. And Filippo Lorenzen is curating it. And I'm very excited about it. And, you know,
it's great.
Yeah, and so Filippo and I have been talking about, and so the show is going to be my digital embodiments, because my style of animation is all about digital embodiment. I know I didn't get a chance to talk about that much, but it's really about the style of figuration that's capturing everything that's happening to us as a result of migrating to the digital from the physical. And the style of animation and chronometric sculpture that I employ is about, you know, that embodiment. But anyway, so the show is going to be called Digital Embodiment and Transgressions. And so we were talking about a room of my embodiments that goes back to, you know, the 80s in terms of my figurative animation, digital animation. But I was thinking of digital, you brought that up, and I have tons of footage from the 90s. The show that I was in, which was curated by Ronnie Catrone, and I actually have the catalog for it if anybody wants to see it. But it was called.
We'd all love to see it, I think.
Oh, if you see this catalog, you will not believe the crazy cyber art revolution that happened in 1996 at Mary Anthony Galleries. As Ronnie Catrone, the artist, and Andy Warhol, you know, factory, he had done some of Andy's work at the factory in the 60s. Anyways, Ronnie curated the show. H.R. Giger was in the show. Future Sound of London was in the show with huge early canvas prints. So it was like this total cyberpunk, total cyber revolution art show. And I have all the video footage of the opening with Debbie Harry there. I mean, it's like Laurie Anderson. You will not, the opening was like the most downtown New York star-studded event. And this is where my box was exhibited in, and that's where Josh Harris got it, the piece from. But the point I'm trying to make is there were lines, okay, to get into the opening that went from Broadway to West Broadway. People were standing in line for hours to get into the show. And it was, I just remember it was so great because there were, all of us were early computer artists from around the world, like Designers Republic of London flew in from London, great guys. You know, it was just, Jaron Lanier was in the show, Ken Feingold. I mean, it was like really a who's who. And it was the wildest, coolest event. And I remember everybody said the same thing. Why isn't the rest of Soho like this show? You know, because people were just so excited to see the work and the energy and all the people then. And I was just thinking of digitizing all those videos for the show at Moghaddam to see if Filippo wanted to just have, you know, a little bit of that, because Filippo said he wanted to see a lot of video from the different eras. So we were talking about that. But a lot of those, I would say Mary Anthony Gallery and Synesthesia, that show was really important because it made in my opinion, a huge difference. .com was, I think, a much bigger deal than people realize, because I remember we actually did an entire exhibition of the internet art on the video wall at 55 Broad Street, which was the New York Technology Art Center building back in 1996. And it was so important to get art into that building because all the major tech companies were there. And it was like my art, which was really not the sort of art that corporate people would show. So that was it. Like, you're asking for the names, and I'm saying we did a lot of things back then that were really unusual, even by today's standards, you know? So .com, I would say Mary Anthony Galleries, Ronnie Catrone's Synesthesia show that he curated. I have the catalog. And I mean, Jaron Lanier Trent Reznor was in that show. It was really like a recording of cyberpunk. And this is the last thing I want to say, that we were all cyberpunkers. And you have to understand something. In the 1980s, computers were the uncoolest thing imaginable. Computers, like, there was nothing that you could associate with computers that would have any appeal for the art world or culture or anything that would be considered as cool. It was cyberpunk and the cyberpunk revolution, and to a large extent, the Amiga and the way it was introduced with Andy Warhol digitizing Deborah Harry at Lincoln Center, that created this cultural shift. So on the one hand, you had Gibson and the Neuromancer trilogy, but on the other hand, you had these other cultural underground revolutions that were cyberpunk that made computers cool and allowed cool culture to integrate the computer revolution. And then you had Internet 1.0, and that changed everything. So I think the trajectory has to be understood that way.
This is just so fascinating. I think we're all just really, really enjoying this. I want to, with 10 minutes left, does anybody in the...
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, if anybody in the audience has a question that they want to ask Marjan, go ahead and put your hand up and I'll call you up, and then go ahead, Wade.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I couldn't find my mute button for some reason. It's really, that's so interesting that you say that, because I think that right now we're going through kind of a resurgence of the cyberpunk era in a lot of ways. I'm seeing kind of some of the hidden corners of the internet starting to revive some of the imagery and the ideology that, you know, was thriving at the time. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of unfolds in this new era of Web 3.0.
Yeah, well, Web 3.0 is another kind of birth of the internet 90s kind of moment. I totally see the similarities. And it's similar because they're on the one hand, you have the idealists and utopianists, which we had very much during Internet 1.0. And on the other hand, you have all the money that's pouring into it and this excitement of let's try every crazy wild thing there is and see what happens. That is good and that is bad, because I also lived through that era in which the Internet 1.0 bubble burst and people lost a lot of money. I mean, you know, when you invest $50 million in a company that disappears overnight, that's a huge loss. And what happened actually was that, you know, the suits came in, as they say, and they cleaned up the internet, and we ended up with Web 2.0, which was highly corporatized, and to a large extent, it still is. I mean, I'm totally with Lee Berners-Lee in terms of, you know, the fact that social media platforms have privatized and locked up what was fundamentally supposed to be a free flow and exchange of ideas across the internet. And so I'm hoping that Web 3.0 can bring back some of that openness and some of that freedom, because to be honest with you, for my generation, there's a lot about social media and the way corporations are now conducting surveillance. I mean, right now we're dealing with surveillance and closure of open debate. And you have to seriously consider, if you start with closure of open debate, what follows next is your behavior in the past is going to be used against you through the surveillance state. So we're looking at very, very scary things moving forward. So my hope is that Web 3.0 can be a real revolution against these inherently nasty, we will call them, tendencies of civilization that are now expressing technologically in terms of the digital and the net.
So we have two audience questions for you, Marjan. I'm going to start with, hopefully I'll say this correctly, Oria?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, Oria.
Gosh, I just want to say thank you so much for dropping so much knowledge up in here. Like, I could not have said, like, I don't know, I think because I lived through what you lived through as a digital artist, I am like, we're on the same page with everything except for I had a hard time, or still have a hard time, sharing your optimism, I guess, about NFTs and about Web 3.0. Having lived through Web 1.0, and as you said, like what happened when the suits came in, quote unquote, and how people just let it happen, you know. So I guess my problem is I fear for what happens when that happens again, you know. As you pointed out, like a lot of this is a pandemic phenomenon. What happens when the pandemic's gone? Also, like, you know, this whole idea of freedom, of financial freedom, and like, you know, free flowing Bitcoin or whatever, you know, how long is that going to last? I guess I'm cynical enough from all that stuff you discussed to sort of be, I don't know, suspicious or at least cautious or something. And I'd like to know where's the dark side for you, I guess.
Well, no, I'm not totally utopianistic. I see the similarities, and I pointed out, I see a lot of problems. I mean, and my biggest problem is that, and this is something I brought up to Angie Taylor and a few of the other older crypto artists, and I pointed out that, you know, when you see these NFT works selling for outrageously large amounts of money, and the work is, you know, not that you know, I mean, you don't really see any, what I'd like to coin a new term. How about we call it organic evaluation as opposed to sponsored evaluation? So, I mean, you really don't see any inherent value in something that's selling for, you know, $500,000 here. And I said, the problem with this is that we all know this is going to tank, right? And the problem is when it tanks, it isn't just that, oh, it's going to affect them. It's going to affect the entire ecosystem. It's going to affect that artist in Brazil who's actually making money and making a living off crypto art. It's going to affect everybody. And so
it's such a good thing that it can't last, I guess. I mean, I can't believe in it lasting. Like, I just think it's going to get shut down because it's too much of a good thing. You know, just like
I agree. I agree. But I still feel that whenever you have disruptions of this kind, there's also opportunity. And what I would like to see is more of a movement to regain open debate and open dialogue on the internet. Because the bigger concern that everybody should have is the closure of public spaces, the closure of public open debate and dialogue. And also our cultural spaces are increasingly neutered and censored. Keep that in mind. You don't want these things to become the future. You know, you don't want this to continue exponentially because I'm telling you, as someone who lived through a country losing all of its freedom overnight, literally, you don't want to go through that. You know, okay. So there is a financial downside, absolutely, but there's also a political, cultural, and philosophical downside to Web 3.0 in terms of where it stands. So, but at the same token, this is the interesting thing, and a lot of the collectors who are in the crypto art space, and I don't know who these people are, but I have been DMing them. Some of them, you know, DM me, and I also look at what they're doing, and some of them actually are not huge fans of corporate closure of cultural space. You know, some of them seem to actually really embrace the idea that there's a need for opening up cultural spaces, making sure the internet remains open and free. I was just speaking at the DRAM conference and in New York City, and two of the biggest venture capital fund guys there were, all three of us were literally uniformly 100% behind the idea of free internet for everybody all over the planet. So I'm just trying to point out that as much as there is this sort of sinister corporate world, there is a counterpoint to that. There are a lot of people who are early pioneers who remember the dream and are in positions of power today, and they're trying to make a difference. They want a free internet for everybody, like the pavement. Nobody owns the pavement is their argument. And I agree, nobody should own access to the internet. It should be made readily available and free of charge to everyone. And then the next phase is to make sure that the open internet remains open and it cannot be locked up or owned by in a manner that's a monopoly by various corporations.
This is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us, Marjan. So I want to make sure we get to, we have one last question from TJ, and TJ is a multidisciplinary new media artist as well. So go ahead, TJ.
Hi, first, preach. Thank you so much. It's so beautiful to hear this from somebody who's been in the rooms where these conversations have been happening for so long. So first, I'll say thank you. And second, I want to just ask about kind of being on the bleeding edge of this and digital art in general. I'm a virtual reality artist, but that being said, I recognize that you know, it's not accessible for a lot of people. So a lot of the work I've been doing recently is sort of taking my original ideas and changing mediums, which seems like something that you've done for years now, where you'll have kind of this crazy abstract idea and then you sort of bring it back to reality to be able to present it and for it to be experienced by the widest amount of people. So I guess my question is, how do you do that while still making it clear that, hey, this version isn't it. This version is just sort of a version of it, but there's something, I don't want to say higher, but something that is the more pure version of the idea.
That's actually a really good question. The first thing I would like to tell you is that please, as a VR artist, please keep in mind that that the highest selling work of crypto art on Super Rare last week by a woman artist was VR. Okay, it was a VR house designed for metaverse of your choice. So please understand, TJ, that broke records, and it wasn't an animation. It was, well, it was an animation featuring the actual VR house, but the collector gets the VR house for either Decentraland, you know, or any of the other metaverses, Somnium Space, etc. So just keep in mind that the piece of digital art that just broke Super Rare's record last week was VR. The second thing that I wanted to share is that, you know, I have 3 pieces of advice for all digital artists. Don't focus on output. Output changes, you know. Like my whole thing is I've been doing 3D CG, and as a result, I've done print, I've done AR, I've done VR, I've done physical sculpture, I've done animation. But to me, the form changes in each era, and so be independent of form and be ready to pivot, because things pivot fast and things change fast. And the third thing that I would say is that I haven't just been a fine arts artist, but I've also been a production artist. And for me, obviously that was necessary because, you know, I had no money, and, you know, my family had no money. My mother worked in a department store for many years until she retired, and I now take care of her. So, you know, I had to, and I'm the primary breadwinner of my household. So, you know, I had to work for a living. I still work for a living. I mean, my whole life is working for a living. And so so that aspect of production work was important. But something else that I would like to emphasize is that production work gave me the skills that I needed for my fine arts work. And production, I still do some production work, although nowhere near as much as before. But even though I'm in crypto art sale and I've had what are considered as highly respectable sales for my first 5 pieces, and they've all sold into very well-known collections, you know, I'm still doing other things. I'm doing this project with Helium. I have a very large public art commission this year. I'm creating permanent AR, which is a big deal, experience, and also life-size sculpture from one of my figures carved with a 6-axis robot carving arm for Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland, where the Queen of England stays at when she's in Ireland. So I'm still doing commission, and I'm also doing a branding project with a French company. So I'm still doing other things that are not crypto art. And not maybe some of them are fine arts commissions. Yes, some of them are not. So my advice to every digital artist is you know, don't be too dependent on form. You know, somebody pointed out that we know crypto art ride is going to end, and I agree. That's why it's not a good idea to be too dependent on it. You know, keep other revenue streams and other options open, because the nature of the technology, and, you know, Ray Sharkey, the Digerati, always says the inherent tendency of the technology is towards speed and efficiency. What does that mean? With each year, the speed and efficiency with which the technology changes increases. So don't hang on to anything for too long, or don't depend on it like that, because it's going to change and none of us can predict it. You know, we've really entered that era of unpredictable high-speed change, and who knows where we're going to be at next year. So the best way to have a digital art practice, in my opinion, is to have one that is independent on form, but capable of delivering form at the same time, and rooted in different ecosystems. So maintain a presence in production arm and branding while doing fine arts. That's really the recommendation that I have.
This is just so amazing, Marjan. I want to thank you so much. And if there's any last minute things that you want to leave us with, I will just note, I can't wait to own my own Marjan work. I'm hoping that that happens within the next year. So I'm a big fan. So it's really, really great to have you. Any last minute things you want to leave us with before we end the interview?
Yeah, the last thing I want to say, I'm dropping another Lordess this Friday on Super Rare. And just a quick thing, you asked about the glitch goddesses. The glitch goddesses, yeah, the glitch goddesses came into being as an art historic intervention. And for me, this was a case where only digital plasticity and time-based media could intervene art historically. And they intervene this on the idea that a woman is a singular form. So the glitch goddess is always changing from slender to heavy to pregnant to old to young. And, everything about a woman's body is designed to change. And that's actually built into the morphology, the female-born humans. But so anyway, so the point was, and her dialogue was, inequality in the art world. And, when that video went viral with millions of views, and if you read the comments, and there were like thousands of comments from women all over the world, everybody was focusing on two things: the issues relating to the body and inequality at the same time. I actually used some of those comments as the voiceover in the exhibited print triggered AR versions. So it was crowdsourced from the internet comments. But Lourdes came out of that Glitch Goddess series, and she's the most surrealistic of my Glitch Goddesses. And she first appeared in the Kavanaugh Haunted My Freeze London 2018 art hack. And then she also, in her current form, where her body drops and intersects itself, she was born in the Art Basel 2019 art hack. But so the second version of the Lourdesses I've been doing with crypto art is I really put a lot of thought into delivering animated paintings, which I've done for a very long time. And I was really trying to sort of struggling with creating space for Lourdes in particular. And that's when I came up with the idea of taking GAN generated paintings and voxelizing them as 3D CG as the backdrop. And the Lourdes, the whole concept of the Lourdes drop, in which her body drops, is she starts in a form that's recognizable based on ideas of sexual longing, attractiveness, and desire rooted in the physical. But then she forms, through my chronometric sculpture technique, the polar opposites. So, the midsection becomes huge and rotund, the breasts drop, and she also intersects her own body. She's one of my very few figures that has that kind of intersectional deformation within the body, because they each deform in a slightly different way. So anyways, the second Lourdes I have, which is a bicolor Lourdes with red and teal voxelized GAN generated painting. I just did the promo for it, posted it to Twitter this morning. She's dropping on Friday on Super Rare. And she's the second Lourdes. The first one sold in December. And there's a couple of more Lourdesses. And I'd like to be able to drop these Lourdesses from time to time, because I really, personally, I feel as if they're some of my finest fine arts for exhibition work. And I know they're really, sometimes I was actually shocked that somebody bought it, because so many of these collectors are men. And they're like, you have to sort of wonder, do they even get these feminist ideas? Do they? Yeah. But much to my amazement and surprise, they do. And they actually have a real appreciation of the art. The collector who got the first Lourdes is based in Europe, and he has a real appreciation of the artistic aspects of Lourdes. So I mean, I actually was really thrilled about that. So I'm very happy about the second Lourdes drop this Friday.
That's so awesome. And maybe the same thing will happen, like you were saying, how now there's a full female team that you've been working with on these projects. Maybe in a few years, within the next year, maybe it'll be a lot more women becoming collectors, like I would like to become. But I want to say thank you so much, Marjan. Everybody check her out on I just retweeted her. So if you go to my bio and you scroll all the way down, you can see her. You can also, she's on Twitter, on Instagram. And I just want to thank you so much. This is just, I think I speak for everybody saying that we've thoroughly enjoyed this hour with you, and just a huge fan. So true honor to have this hour. Thank you so much. And everybody check out her drop on Super Rare at the end of the week. So thank you so much, Marjan.
Awesome. Great. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Awesome.
you.
Bye.
Okay, bye guys.
Bye.